MA Philosophy, MPY001, Block number 6, Contemporary Indian Thinkers, Aurovindo and S.Radhakrishnan. Objectives. One of the important aims of this unit is to introduce some of the prominent philosophical thoughts of two prominent Indian philosophers, namely Aurovindo and S. Radhakrishnan, to the students. It will provide a general picture of their understanding on the absolute or God, nature, human being, etc. It also helps students have a glance at a certain concepts which are peculiar and unique to each philosopher. Introduction. Aurobindo is considered as the greatest mystic of the modern age. The robust intellectualism, the powerful expression of philosophical thought, and the mystic vision are uniquely blended in his writing. Radhakrishnan's salient feature comprise universal outlook, synthesis of the East, and the best in religion, religion and philosophy, the spiritualism and humanism, and openness to the influences of science, art, and values. The values, culture, tradition, religion, and philosophies of different countries are in synthesis in Radhakrishnan's philosophy. His philosophy does not aim at merely a constructive synthesis but at a constructive assimilation of mystic perception and experience. Life and the work of Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo Arvind Ghosh, 1872 to 1950, yogi, nationalist, poet, critic, thinker, spiritual leader of India, was born at Konanagar, West Bengal on the 15th of August 1872 as the third son of Krishnadhan Ghosh and uh, Swaranalata Devi. Aurobindo Ghosh was educated in England from the age of 7 to the age of 21. In 1906, Aurobindo joined the political movement of Indian resistance to British colonial rule and became a prominent voice of the Nationalist Party. In 1908, he was arrested. In 1910, Aurobindo shifted to French India, Pondicherry, where he developed his great religious and political vision of reality. He spent the next 40 years of his life in Pondicherry, formulating his vision of spiritual evolution and integral yoga, and refusing to pursue direct involvement in political events. He died in Pondicherry in 1950. Some of his main works include The Future Evolution of Man, The Hour of God, The Life Divine, The Light on Yoga, Savitri on a Legend and a Symbol, Foundation of Indian Culture, More Lights on Yoga, The Riddle of the World, The Idea of Human Unity, Basis of Yoga, The Supernatural Manifestation on Earth, etc. At an early age of his life itself, he was exposed to the world of Western philosophy. He was also well acquainted with great philosophers like Plato and Aristotle. His study of ancient Indian philosophy, especially the Advaita, Vedanta, and Yoga, made a great impact on him. However, it is right to say that he relied mainly upon his own vision, contemplation, and reason. He believed that religion is a Sanatan Dharma, eternal and universal. It cannot be confined to one religious tradition and one set of texts. It only infallible scripture is to be found in the heart of men, women. However, this eternal religion is remarkably well expressed in the spiritual tradition of India, and so India has a God-given mission to be the guardian, exemplar, and missionary of this religion. Aurobindo goes back to early Vedas and discovers there, expressed in symbolic ways, the basic spiritual teachings of Sanatan Dharma, while surface level meaning speaks of myths and rituals. The symbological way of understanding the spiritual experience reaches the deeper secret meaning. The purpose of Aurobindo's philosophy was to bring out this meaning, the transcendent reality in Aurobindo's thought. Aurobindo conceives reality as supremely spiritual. The ultimate reality for Sri Aurobindo is the triune principle of Satchidanand. The ultimate reality is transcendent. This transcendent reality expresses itself in the cosmos. The ultimate reality is linked up with the cosmos by the triple formula of supermind, that Brahman is in all things are in Brahman, and all things are Brahman. In the thought of Sri Aurobindo, supreme reality is eternal, absolute, and finite. Since it is absolute and infinite, it is in its essence indeterminable. The pure absolute is indefinable. infinite, timeless, and spaceless. It cannot be summed up in any equality, any quantity and quantities. It cannot be composed of any quality and or combination of qualities. The absolute is beyond stability and movement, as it is beyond unity and multiplicity. The absolute is independent of our relatives, but it is also the basis of our relatives. It governs, pervades, and constitutes our relatives, though it is indescribable and unknowable. It is self-evident through itself. Sachidanand, the highest positive expression of the reality to our consciousness, is Sachidanand. Sachidanand is the one with a triple aspect. For us, the highest positive expression of Brahman is the Sachidanand, or the existence, consciousness, bliss, all in all. In other words, in the Supreme, that there are not three but one. Existence is consciousness, consciousness is bliss, and they are not distinct at all. It manifests itself as indeterminate, as well as determinate, as nirgun, as well as sagun, as one as one, as well as many, as being, as be well, as becoming, and yet is transcends them all. The existence Sat of Brahman is that which appears to us as Atman, Ishvara, and Purush. The consciousness Chit of Brahman, which is always a force, Shakti, manifests itself as Maya, Shakti, and Prakriti. The bliss Anand of Brahman underlies all these manifestations, and it is out of sheer bliss and divine manifests himself as this world. These is the three aspects, and these powers embraces all reality, and when taken as a whole reconcile all apparent contradictions. Supermind principle. In the philosophy of Sri Aurobindo, the ultimate reality becomes the world by the principle of supermind. It is present there in everything of the world as consciousness and controller. Supermind is creative principle. It has been variously described by him. It is the real idea. It is the truth consciousness, the seer will, the creative idea, the creator, the God, and so on. The mind is divided into three parts: thinking mind, dynamic mind, and externalizing mind. The former is concerned with ideas and knowledge in their own ways, the second with putting out of mental forces of realization of the idea, and the third with the expression of there. For Arvindo, the overmind is a link between the higher and the lower hemisphere. The overmind is a sort of delegation from the supermind, which supports the present evolutionary universe in which we live here in matter. By the supermind, what we mean is the full truth consciousness of the divine nature, in which there can be no place for the principle of division and ignorance. It is always a full light and knowledge superior to all mental substance or mental movements. We call it the supermind or the truth consciousness because it is a principle superior to mentality and exists, acts, and proceeds in the fundamental truth and unity of things, and not like the mind in their appearances and phenomenal divisions. Nature of creation, the world process. Sri Aurobindo conceives creation as a double process. It is a process of descent and ascent, and involution and evolution. First of all, it is descent of the spirit into the worldly form, and then also implies an ascent of the worldly forms to its original higher status. Aurobindo describes creation as the plunge of the spirit into ignorance. Ignorance, according to Aurobindo, is not a separate power, but it is a part and parcel of divine consciousness itself. In evolution, the spirit is descended into a matter. The movement of ascent, that is evolution, follows the same pattern as the process of descent, but in a reverse order, starting from matter and reaching the supermind, and thereby sharing in the life of the absolute. Evolution presupposes involution. In other words, evolution is possible only because involution has already taken place. Matter can evolve into life only because life itself has evolved into it. The lower cannot evolve into the higher unless the higher is already in it. So therefore he conceives evolution as a reverse process of involution. This process of ascent has a triple character: widening. Simple forms of matter take an increasingly complex character, so as to admit the concentration of a complex and subtle form of consciousness. Be ascent from lower to higher grade of being. See integration. As soon as the evolution reaches a higher grade, it takes up all the lower grades and transforms them according to its own principles and laws. It can be expressed in the following manner: absolute being, Satchit Anand, so to supermind. Involution, overmind, intuition, illumined mind, higher mind, life, matter. Evolution, matter, life, mind, higher mind, illumined mind, intuition, overmind. Man in terms of evolution, according to Aurobindo, so far evolution has passed from the state of complete inconscience to grade of mental, which is well represented in man movement. So in man movement lies the possibility of the next step of evolution, the transition to the supramental level. Aurobindo believes that the man movement who is evident to our senses is not the real man movement. At least she is not the complete man woman. In the process of evolution, the appearances of man woman does not correspond with the appearance of mind. With the animal, the mind has already appeared, but with the coming of human intellect, we have new dimension of the mind. Now, apart from the knowledge of appearance, we have self-consciousness too. Following the general principle of the evolution, man woman takes with him her the inferior levels of matter and life to a higher level. There is no opposition between matter, life and mind, but an integration of the three in a higher synthesis. Man, woman, and all the lower level of reality reach the divine manhood and super manhood. This can be realized only through a long process of evolution. This process cannot be limited to one lifespan. This evolution is fully possible only if we accept the general principle of rebirth, reality, and its aspect. The soul is a spark of the divine. It is the representative of the central being. It supports all individual existence in nature. The psychic being is a conscious form of that soul growing in the evolution in the in the persistent process that develops first life in matter, mind in life, until finally mind can develop into overmind and overmind into a supermental truth. The soul supports the nature in its evolution through these grades, but is itself not any of these things. The psychic being is, according to Aurobindo, the original conscience of man woman. It is the concealed witness, hidden guide, inner light, and inner voice of the mystic. Sri Aurobindo uses the word consciousness in the following senses: conscious being or spirit, Purusha or Chaitanya; awareness of knowledge, Chetna or Jnana; consciousness, force or conscious energy, Chitti Shakti, power of awareness of self and things; Chetna, the faculty of becoming aware of anything; Chitta, Manashetna. Consciousness is the fundamental thing. The fundamental thing is existence. Not only the microsomes, but also the microsomes is nothing but consciousness arranging itself. Being and becoming as real. Sri Aurobindo definitely tries to solve the problem of being and becoming in the most original manner. He tells that both being and becoming are real. He takes both the facts of being and becoming with equal importance. The word being is not used by the Sri Aurobindo always strictly in the sense of Atman or the original and fundamental reality, except in a few places like the divine being, the supreme being, etc. In other places, he has used it in the sense of existence or that which exists or is conceived of existing life, etc. As the word is generally used in the English language, the absolute manifests itself in two terms: being and becoming. The being is the fundamental reality. It is a dynamic power and result, and an effectual reality, a creative energy, and working out of the being, a constantly persistent yet mutable form, process, and outcome of its immutable formless essence. What is original and eternal forever in the divine is the being. What is developed in consciousness, condition, forces, forms, etc. by the divine power is becoming. The eternal divine is the being. The universe in time and all that is apparent in it is becoming. Synthesis of yoga. Attainment of supernatural status is not the ultimate destiny of human being. The superman also has to work for the transformation of others, so one has to lead a divine life, a perfect life on the earth, a life not of limited consciousness but a life of inner completeness and perfection of being. Aurobindo believes that this divine life can be realized with the help of yoga. Describing the nature of yoga, he says yoga means union with the divine, a union in either transcendental or cosmic or individual, or as in our yoga, all three together. Yoga helps all the aspects of evolution, widening, heightening, and integration, and therefore it is internal. The triple yoga of knowledge, evolution, devotion, and action leads to the transformation of man's, woman's mind, emotion, and will. Aurobindo classified the various yoga according to the way they have inserted themselves in human life. Here we have a more complete list of yoga. At the lower level, we have the Hatha Yoga, which is concerned with the bodily transformation. Be a little higher, we have Raj Yoga, which is concerned with the transformation of mental state. level. Number C, finally, we have the yoga of triple transformation, which is the three benches of Jnana, Bhakti, and Karma, which lead finally to the yoga of self-perfection. Social and political philosophy, we find in his early writings a radical approaches to politics. We see that nationalism appears as a sort of religion for him in the early period of his life. According to him, the individual is a value that cannot be subordinated to society. The individual has a key role to play, since it is through him her that the supernatural, supermental is to manifest itself in the world. Although Aurobindo uses organic analogies to speak of society, he always sees that the individual in society is more than a cell in the body. He does not oppose individual and society, both the manifestation of the divine reality. There is a relationship of reciprocity between these two, and both tend towards the same goal. Radhakrishnan's life and work. He was born on 5th September 1888 at Tiruttani, a small village 40 miles northeast of Madras. He was the second child of his parents. From 1900 to 1904, he studies in Voorhees College, Vellore. Later, he moved to Madras and studied in Madras Christian College. He rendered his service as a teacher in philosophy in Madras Presidency College and in the University of Mysore. He was vice president from 1952 to 1962, that is for two consecutive terms. Later, he became the president of the Indian Union, securing 97.98 vote for the term of 5 years. His main works include East and West, Eastern religion and Western thought, East and West in religion, the reason of religion in the contemporary philosophy, religion and society, the recovery of faith, Indian philosophy and idealistic view of life, the Hindu view of life. Radhakrishnan has deep study of the classical literature. He studied the Indian philosophy in depth, which has influenced him very much. The study of Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, commentaries on Brahma Sutra by Sankara, Ramanuja, Madhava, Nirmark and others, the dialogue of Buddha and the Buddhist and the Jain scriptures broadened his thought. Western philosophers such as Plato, Pontinus, Kant, Bradley, Bergson, and Whitehead also influenced him in his writing. Amongst the contemporary thinkers of India, Gandhi and Tagore were his friends, and they had definite influence on him. Radhakrishnan is a mystic philosopher. His religious thought serves as the data to his philosophy. Though he had widely read the ancient, medieval, and modern philosophies, still for the real source of his writing, he relies on his personal spiritual experiences. Nature of his philosophy, his basic philosophical position is of a kind of synthesis of Advaita Vedanta and the philosophy of absolute idealism. Like Vedanta, he believes that the reality is one. Like absolute idealism, he assures that everything is a necessary aspect of that one, so it can broadly be described as a philosophy of monistic idealism. Since Radhakrishnan conceives reality as spiritual, he is an idealist. He realized the need for the reawakening of the soul and the recovery of the spiritual life. Thus, his philosophical thinking seems to be an attempt to illustrate that the ultimate nature of the universe is spiritual. Because of his tremendous emphasis on spirituality, he appears to be a mystic too, the absolute or the Brahman. Radhakrishnan conceives the nature of the absolute as monistic. In other words, the absolute in itself is essentially one. He has come to realize that the world expresses a unity within its processes. This is the reason why he emphasizes the monistic character of the absolute. The absolute is conceived by Radhakrishnan as pure consciousness, pure freedom, and infinite possibility. According to Radhakrishnan, the absolute has to be spiritual. It is conceived as a free spirit. It is free in such a way that there is nothing to limit it. Its freedom is uninterrupted. The absolute is also infinite. It is self-grounded, and it is the foundation of everything else. Since it is infinite, it is changeless. It is also self-existent and complete in itself. It is also eternal in the sense of being timeless. Radhakrishnan calls the absolute the whole of perfection because of the reason that he asserts that the absolute is beyond all kind of expression. Absolute and God. Radhakrishnan distinguishes between the absolute and God. He feels that in order to explain the universe, it is necessary to think of a principle that would account for the order and purpose of the universe. He also feels that there has to be a principle, God, a non-temporal and actual being, by which by which the indeterminateness of creativity can be transmitted into a determinate principle. So it implies that the divine intelligence, the creative power, has to be conceived as the intermediary between the absolute being and the cosmic process. It is here that the principle of God appears in the philosophy of Radhakrishnan. The Supreme has been conceived as revealing itself into ways absolute and Ishvara. God is the absolute in action. It is God, the creator, the real in relation to itself is the absolute, and the real in relation to the creation is God. He believes that absolute is the object of metaphysical aspiration and God is of religious aspiration. Reconciliation between Shankara and Ramanuja. Radhakrishnan reconciles the view of Shankara and Ramanuja by maintaining that the Brahma of Shankara is absolute and that of Ramanuja is God. God is a person, but absolute is not. God is an object of the intellect, but the absolute is known through intuition. The absolute is pro cosmic God, and God is the projected power of absolute. Intuition is higher than intellect, and it overcomes the dualism of subject and object. Our thought is limited, and when it tries to grasp the supra-rational absolute, it imposes its own limitations on the former. Thus, God is the absolute pressed into the mold of thought, which can't do away with the distinction between the self and the other. But this distinction is overcome by intuition, which is supra-rational. The nature of the world and creation. Since he considers God as the creative principle of the world, he represents a spiritualistic account of creation and the world. The universe is conceived as expressing an aspect of the divine plan. The world is created by God. The world has beginning and end. God is not separate from it. God is said to be the past, present, and future of the world, and yet he is quite different from the world. This distinction is between the creator and the created. Creation is the actualization of one of the inherent possibilities of the absolute. Radhakrishnan explains that the spirit enters into the spirit of the non-spirit to realize one of the infinite possibilities that exist potentially in the spirit. He also speaks of the accidental nature of the world, where he affirms that the creation is a free act of God. In other words, creation is not a necessary act for the creator. He also says that though the universe is an accident, it is real so far as it is the absolute accident. Human being and the nature of soul. In explaining the nature of soul, Radhakrishnan seems to be realistic. He accepts the ultimate spiritual nature of the soul, and at the same time, he asserts the reality and the value of biological life to life. Also, he affirms that human being cannot be fully known through the science alone. There is still something in man woman which is beyond intellect and senses. So according to Radhakrishnan, there are two aspects of human being. They are known as finite and infinite aspect of man woman. Radhakrishnan used the word soul in a very wider sense, so much as even those bodily activities which have tendencies towards transcendence are called as soul activities. Human beings, unlike other beings, has a peculiar ability to reflect and to plan. She can go beyond himself herself. Radhakrishnan calls it as self transcendence. For him, it is one of the important aspect of the soul. Radhakrishnan defines the finite aspect of man woman as those aspects that are determined by empirical or environmental conditions. He calls this aspect of man woman differently: the empirical man, the physical man, the natural man, and the bodily man. He also speaks of the infinite nature of human being beyond his her external conditioning. There lies a capacity of self-transcendence. It is different and higher than empirical. Radhakrishnan calls it as the spirit in man woman. In other words, the infinite aspect of man woman consists in her spirituality. Karma. Everything in the universe is an effect of its past, and is the cause of its future changes at the same time. It embodies the energy of the past as well as causes changes in the future. Karma is not so much a principle of reward and punishment, but as one of continuity. Karma has two aspects: retrospective and perspective. Continuity with the past as well as creative freedom of the self. The karmas binds with the past by giving structure to ourself and thereby determining it to that extent. Yet man woman is free in his her action and acquires fresh potencies. Radhakrishnan says that we are both determined and free. Our actions are determined by our past karmas. In whether we are determined by the character of ourself. The dynamic organization of the tendencies of self is evidently a matter of our past karmas, but still we are free in our actions and have wide scope for fresh activity. Radhakrishnan removes the prevailing misconception by asserting that the theory of karma is not one based on reward and punishment, and it is also wrong to think that moral and virtuous karmas lead to success and evil to failure. Freedom and self-determination. Free will is action done by self-determination. When an individual perform an action of his or her choice, the act done is the self-determined one. Dada Krishnan here explains the meaning of the word self-determination. A self is an organized whole. It represents a form of relatedness. Self-determination means action done by the whole of the self nature. Only that action is free of the self-determined in which the individual employs his or her whole nature, searches the different possibilities and selects the one which commands itself to his or her whole self. Human being are relatively free. There is no complete freedom in human beings action. It is only God who is absolutely free. When the self becomes coextensive the one's whole being only, then the self becomes absolutely free. Human being is only relatively free. It is a matter only of degrees. When an action is done by the whole self, we are most free, but our action are least free when done by sheer habit or convention. A human action is motivated with some ends or purposes. All his or her activities are regulated towards some purposes, and therefore our actions are determined by some external goals or ends in view. But our actions are also governed by our past. If men, women were free from their past deeds, there remains no moral responsibilities on them. Therefore, no action is absolutely free either in the human or in the external world. There is the continuity of the past in the present and the present conditions on the future. Radhakrishnan is against the view of predestination in which God is the sovereign who works without law and principle. For him, life is a gracious gift of God who expresses his sovereignty through law. He says such a view of divine sovereignty is unethical. God's love is manifested in and through law. Importance of rebirth. The Radhakrishnan speaks of rebirth in a concrete sense. According to him, rebirths are essential for the realization of the distant goal salvation. It cannot be realized in a single life as the span of life is short and realization of union with God is a far off goal. Pursuit in the series of rebirth is essential. Radhakrishnan conceives that rebirths are essential for the realization of the different possibilities existing in us. Salvation. Radhakrishnan believes in an simultaneous salvation for all and not individual salvation. As God is the creator of the world, so long as the world lasts, God must continue as God without becoming one with absolute. But the individual who is a creature of God must remain with God till the later earns the absolute. The world cannot disappear if there is a single soul without salvation. So individual salvation can only be incomplete salvation. The self is the most integrated and highest product. The core a human being pursues his her ideals, the more integrated and organized he becomes. The highest degree of unity in an individual self is attained when life is identified with one supreme purpose. The supreme purpose of human being is to become God. The cosmos is working towards that end. It is rushing for the union with God. It is by meditation and ethical life that an individual breaks off his her narrow individualism and unites with the spiritual universalism. When all selves obtain communion and oneness with God, when all becomes prophets and seers, the world realizes its destiny. The final salvation of an individual is dependent on the cosmic salvation. At the ultimate and all the selves unite with the absolute, there is achieved when the freedom from rebirth, causation of worldly existence, and eternal oneness with Sachidanand. The final salvation is attained when the selves lose their individuality and get united with the all-pervading absolute. The self merges in the Brahman in the Brahman and they lose their identity, existence, name and form. His religious and political thought, man, woman looks for meaning and direction in life. Reason alone cannot give meaning to him, her. Man, woman has a natural tendency to transcend, go beyond the phenomenal world. There is an innate impulse for perfection. He also speaks of universal religion where all religions come together and contribute towards each other's growth. Authentic religion is the wisdom of love that redeems suffering men. Religion is not a set of dogmas, beliefs, ritual rites, creeds, etc., but it must lead to inner realization. It is not institutionalized. He dreamed of a secular India as secular nation. Secularism can't reject religion. Secularism is an attitude of respect for all religious faith or anything which human beings hold as sacred. It is based on the sanctity of individuals. The essence of democracy is consideration for others, respecting each one as sacred, and encouraging the rich variety and diversity. The aim of democracy is just society. Let us sum up. Sri Aurobindo's philosophy is the basic philosophy of the 12th century Indian philosophy. His philosophy is a mighty synthesis of the Oriental and the Occidental, the ancient and the modern thought, which can break up into many channels of thought. He represents the ultimate reality as a spiritual presentation of God as Sachidanand is peculiar to Aurobindo. In this thought, matter is spirit. The integral theory of evolution put forth by Sri Aurobindo is one of the best theories of evolution. The higher divine principle of the consciousness get unfolded in evolution process. The Aurobindo is the first seer who us points out to us the nature and spiritual pupil of consciousness. He also propounds earthly immortality, but his individual salvation is inseparably related with the cosmic yoga. Sri Aurobindo envisages spiritual humanism too. So, in this sense, his philosophy contributes much to the philosophical literature. Radhakrishnan's philosophy can be termed as monistic idealism. One of his main concerns was to give a spiritual outlook to everything. He also makes a distinction between the absolute and God. The world is considered as the creative work of God, but at the same time, both God and the world are different. The credit goes to the Radhakrishnan for providing a holistic understanding of human person. He affirms the spiritual nature of human soul, but at the same time give due respect to the value of biological aspect of human person. He provides a very reasonable and practical explanation of the theory of karma by removing the traditional misconception regarding it. While speaking about the self-determination, he assumes that the human being is relatively free. His explanation on the cosmic salvation explains that cosmic salvation is possible when all identity themselves with the absolute losing each one's identity. Though many consider him as an interpreter, the greatness of Radhakrishnan lies on the fact that he presented his philosophical conviction systematically and with an academic precision. Thank you.